The concert hall was buzzing with excitement as people gathered to watch one of the world's most famous pianists perform live. Every seat was filled, the lights dimmed, and the air carried that rare silence of anticipation before a masterpiece begins. Among the crowd, a simple woman sat quietly in the back row, unnoticed by most, her clothes plain, her presence modest. She wasn't there for the glamour or the prestige, just the love of music. No one could have imagined she would soon become the center of the night's most unforgettable moment. When the pianist walked onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. Known for his charm as much as his talent, he had a reputation for sometimes being playful, even mischievous during his performances. On this evening, as the music paused for a light-hearted interaction, he scanned the hall and his eyes landed on the humble woman. With a grin, he invited her to the stage, almost as a joke. The crowd chuckled, expecting a brief, awkward moment before the star took back the spotlight. After all, what chance did a simple woman have sitting at such a grand piano in front of hundreds of people? But what happened next silenced the laughter. She slowly walked up, her steps unsure yet steady, and sat before the shining instrument. The pianist leaned back, amused, waiting for the audience's giggles to continue. The woman, however, placed her fingers on the keys with a stillness that made even the restless whispering fade. Something in her calm expression suggested that the joke was about to turn into something no one expected. The audience held its breath as the first note echoed through the hall, leaving everyone wondering just who this woman really was. The first note lingered in the air longer than anyone expected, soft yet commanding. It was the kind of sound that made people instinctively lean forward, unsure of what was about to happen, but unable to look away. The famous pianist, who had been smiling at his own joke just moments before, now raised his eyebrows in surprise. This was not the timid pressing of keys that the audience had imagined. There was control, precision, and something far deeper, emotion. The woman's hands moved with grace, each touch on the piano more confident than the last. She didn't rush, she didn't stumble, and she didn't seem bothered by the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Instead, it felt as though she was playing for something beyond the room, as if the music belonged to another time in her life. People began exchanging glances, whispering quietly, wondering who she could be. No one in the hall recognized her. She wasn't dressed like a performer, nor did she carry herself like someone used to stages and applause. She looked like an ordinary person who might have been a teacher, a mother, or simply someone who loved music in the privacy of her home. But the sounds she drew from the grand piano told a different story. They revealed experience, years of practice, and a connection to music that was not learned overnight. The famous pianist leaned closer, curiosity replacing his earlier amusement. He seemed unsettled, almost as though the spotlight he had owned so confidently was slipping away. The audience's attention had shifted entirely, and every new note the woman played deepened the mystery. Who was she really? And why had she hidden such a gift from the world until this very moment? The music filled every corner of the hall, and with each passing moment, the audience felt as though they were witnessing something extraordinary. The woman's fingers moved effortlessly, carrying both strength and vulnerability. People who had come to admire the famous pianist now found themselves drawn into her world. Their emotions stirred in ways they had not expected. The room was no longer buzzing with chatter or laughter. It was held captive by the sound of an unknown woman turning a joke into a revelation. Yet, beneath the beauty of the moment, tension began to form. The pianist, standing just a few feet away, felt a shift he could not ignore. This was supposed to be his stage, his evening, his name in lights. But now, the audience's focus had turned, and he could feel his pride slowly being chipped away. His polite smile was beginning to falter. What had started as a harmless tease now felt like a challenge he hadn't prepared for. Among the crowd, some whispered about whether she had once been a pianist herself. Others speculated she might have been a forgotten student or someone who had given up her dreams long ago. A few even wondered if this entire moment had been staged, though the genuine surprise on the star's face told a different story. Meanwhile, the woman kept her eyes fixed on the keys, not once looking at the audience or the man who had invited her up. It was as though she was reclaiming something she had lost, channeling years of silence into music that could no longer be hidden. The longer she played, the more the question grew in everyone's mind. Was this a simple accident of fate, or the beginning of a conflict that would change both their lives forever? The hall seemed to hold its breath as the woman's music rose higher, each note more powerful than the last. Her plain appearance no longer mattered. She commanded the stage with a presence that no one could ignore. The audience leaned forward in their seats, waiting for the next phrase, their emotions pulled back and forth like waves. Some felt awe, others disbelief, and a few even felt a strange tension between admiration and unease. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and no one wanted to miss a second of it. The famous pianist, standing just off to the side, clenched his jaw. At first, he had laughed along with the audience, confident in his own brilliance. But now, his eyes betrayed a mix of shock and something sharper fear. Each passing note felt like a reminder that talent could exist anywhere, even in the most unexpected places. His reputation, built on years of performances, suddenly felt fragile in the face of this mysterious woman who had stepped into his world without warning. Whispers spread across the hall, soft at first, but then louder, until the sound of murmurs mixed with the music. People asked who she was, whether she had ever been on stage before, and how someone so ordinary could play with such mastery. A child in the front row gasped and whispered to her mother, "She plays better than him." The pianist heard it, and his face tightened. The woman, however, remained still except for her hands. She didn't acknowledge the crowd, the whispers, or the man beside her. It was as though she had been waiting for this exact moment all her life. The music surged towards something greater, something unstoppable, pulling everyone to the edge of anticipation. The hall was ready for a climax that would decide everything, yet no one knew what was about to happen when the final note arrived. Just when the audience thought they had seen everything, the unexpected happened. The woman's hands, steady and sure, shifted into a melody no one recognized at first. It wasn't a classical piece, nor one of the pianist's famous works. It was something else, something haunting and deeply personal. The notes carried a story, a memory, perhaps even a confession hidden inside the music. The crowd grew restless, sensing that this performance was no accident. This was deliberate, and it meant something. The famous pianist froze. His expression, once proud and controlled, faltered as he leaned closer to the instrument. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He knew the piece. In fact, he knew it better than anyone. It was an unfinished composition he had abandoned years ago, a work he had never shared publicly, buried away in notebooks and drafts. No one should have known it existed, yet here it was, alive under the hands of a woman the world believed to be a stranger. Gasps rippled through the hall as the music grew bolder, sharper. The whispers turned into waves of speculation. Was she connected to him? Had she been a forgotten student, or worse, someone who had once stood in his shadow? The tension between them now felt undeniable, stretching across the stage like a wire ready to snap. The pianist stepped forward, almost interrupting her, but stopped. If he silenced her now, he would look weak, defensive. If he let her continue, the truth behind the music might reveal more than he wanted anyone to know. His hands twitched at his sides, torn between pride and panic, while the woman never looked up, her focus locked on the keys. The hall was no longer just an audience. It was a witness to a hidden battle, one that threatened to rewrite everything people thought they knew about the man they came to see. The hall was trembling with anticipation as the mysterious woman reached the final passages of the unfinished composition. Each note struck harder, weaving together fragments of emotion that felt almost too raw to bear. The audience, now fully invested, barely dared to breathe. The famous pianist stood frozen, his polished smile gone, his face pale with recognition and disbelief. As the woman reached the final sequence, the truth unfolded without a single word. She wasn't just playing a hidden piece, she was completing it. The unfinished bars he had abandoned years ago flowed seamlessly under her touch, transformed into something whole and breathtaking. The audience erupted in gasps as they realized she had not only discovered his lost work but carried the skill to finish it better than he ever had. The pianist's pride cracked. This was supposed to be his night, his stage, his legacy. Yet here was a simple woman from the crowd, stealing not only the spotlight, but also unearthing a secret part of his past. His voice trembled as he finally spoke, loud enough for all to hear. "How do you know this piece?" The woman's hands hovered over the keys as silence fell. Slowly, she lifted her head and met his eyes for the first time that night. Her answer came soft, steady, but powerful enough to cut through the hall. "Because it was never just your piece. You wrote it with me." The crowd erupted in shock. The twist no one expected had been revealed. She was not a stranger at all, but a hidden partner in his music, erased from his story long ago. The performance ended, but the echo of that revelation lingered, leaving everyone stunned. The joke that began the evening had ended by rewriting history, exposing a truth that could never be silenced again. The hall remained silent for a moment after her words, the weight of the revelation settling over everyone like a heavy curtain. The famous pianist stood frozen, unable to hide the truth any longer. He had built his career on brilliance, yes, but also on a silence that erased someone who had once shared in his gift. Now, before hundreds of witnesses, that silence had been broken. The woman closed the piano gently, her fingers lingering on the polished surface. She did not bow or seek applause. For her, the music had spoken louder than anything else could. The audience, however, rose to their feet in a thunderous ovation, their cheers echoing not only for her talent, but for the courage it took to step into the spotlight after years of being hidden. The pianist, humbled and shaken, slowly joined her at the piano. His expression no longer carried pride or arrogance. It carried regret. Though he tried to speak, his words faltered, drowned by the applause. For the first time in his career, the stage did not belong solely to him, and perhaps it never truly had. As the woman stepped down from the stage, many reached out to shake her hand or simply touch her shoulder in admiration. People whispered about her story, about the years she must have spent away from music, and about how destiny had brought her to that moment. The mystery that had begun as a joke ended as a revelation of truth, talent, and resilience. That night reminded everyone of something important. Greatness can come from anywhere, and no voice or melody should ever be silenced. The audience left the hall changed, carrying with them the unforgettable story of a simple woman who turned a stage meant for another into her own triumph.